Hello, friends. This is Joseph Martin. Welcome to The Right Stuff. We're going to talk all things sacred composing today. I know it's going to be slightly frustrating because these things are always best done in person because the nature of composition and these kinds of discussions are more often a Q&A. Now, we do have, as I understand it, a place for you to type in your comments, and we'll be able to answer questions as we go along. We'll just pause in the process, and we'll go from there. Usually when we meet for these things at Alleluia, we always have some people who bring music to be reviewed, and we enjoy that time of going through and doing master classes, drawing grand conclusions as we use people's compositions to remark about the creative process. Unfortunately, in this setting, we're not going to be able to do that, but I do have some things I'd love to talk to you about. And I'm not sure, of course, without being in person and interviewing, usually we take the first 10 minutes going around. I find out what your goals are. Are you publishing? Do you want to get published? You just want to write for your churches? So if I throw a ball here and miss the plate completely with why you came into the room, please don't be shy about typing in a question that might be specific to your own situation, and then I will be happy to kind of do be flexible, and we'll pivot to try to find something that's more online why you came to this session. But first of all, let me just thank you for caring enough about composing. Of course, it's my life. I came to the compositional process through piano, and during my work as a graduate student at the University of Texas, I had my first real church job. Began to write for my choir, my college choir, and my church choir, kind of curate those services in creative ways, I would think. And then eventually, one thing led to the next, and 2,500 pieces ago, I can't believe that I get to do what I do, which is just a real joy. It's something I'm very, just overjoyed to have that a part of my life. And I love to share about that. I think it's a discipline, whether or not I actually got a monetary reimbursement for my efforts. The time I spend lingering with Scripture and trying to translate that into musical sonic reality is time well spent. I do it 6 or 7 days a week, and that is, been for the last 35 years. And I guess one of the first things I would say to you as an aspiring composer is to look at life as a composer and set aside creative time as often as you possible. Become a creature of ritual. Always looking for the hidden song in everything. Whether you're a lyricist or a composer, make sure that your scorebook or your whatever your device is for recording your melodies is not very far away, because you have to begin to really think about things in a different way. When you're reading your daily Bible readings, or you're listening to a sermon, or when you're considering a hymn choice, if you're a choir director, there may be a line that jumps out and presents itself, or a concept that appears to you. Earlier in the day, I presented a piece called The Folded Flag, and it's become, in a very short period of time, in the middle of a pandemic, a very important piece for me. Lots of people are performing it, and that's not necessarily an exclamation point at all. Sometimes things take off and become popular, and they're not... They're results of marketing rather than musical excellence, perhaps. But in this case, I have walked by the flag that was presented to me, the folded flag that was presented to me at Pearl Harbor. I walked past that 1,000 times coming to my office to begin my work. But the one day that I noticed it and paused and thought about, I wonder what I could do with that as a concept, and does it translate to music, and how would it translate to music? So be searching and always striving to look for that next song, something you've walked by a dozen times or heard on a commercial or read in a magazine. All of a sudden it'll leap out at you and become the idea that will be your next project. I was stuck on the tarmac in Atlanta in a rainstorm, and we were all in queue, you know, and I picked up the Delta magazine, opened it up, and there was a jewelry ad in there, and it was a beautiful diamond ring, and the top, the slogan that was written was "Live Your Love." And I loved the fact that it was live and love, and they're almost the same word, but not quite, and the alliteration and the symmetry of it all. And so I sat there during that rainstorm and came up with "Give Your Grace" and "Share Your Song" and "Pass Your Peace," and crafted a text just sitting there instead of just hating being stuck in Atlanta on the tarmac. You go looking, go gold digging. Try to find those hidden jewels that are all around us in our observations. As a writer, you will learn to discipline yourself and to enjoy that ritual. It makes you notice things, even if you never get it published or even if it doesn't become a finished project. Just to make that observation is, I think, quite rewarding. At least it is for me. But I want to talk to you a little bit about what has happened in these last 2 years, some of the things you might be facing on your journey to publication, or just how this time of silence has changed things a little bit, just to give you some focus and some perspective on, for those of you who don't know, I am the head of a publishing company, the sacred division of a publishing company. I get to publish and curate a catalog that has 35,000 copyrights in it. And that's been my privilege and honor for a number of years now. And each year before COVID, we published almost 200 new pieces and 4 collections a year. I'm in charge of recording those and bringing them to market and presenting them very much like I have been doing in these reading sessions. That has taught me a lot, not only from, just how to put things together. It's taught me a lot about the seasons of our faith and the needs that choir directors have and educators have when you're talking about school market materials. And I like to pass that along because I think it directs my writing to a purpose. And I like to find purpose as well as growing my art, if you can call it that. I also want it to be used. That's just my DNA. So I have a formula. I will share it with you. This is it's on the top of my letterhead and it's the top of my websites. But it's about balancing out your view of what sacred writing is. And this is the bumper sticker, if you will. It's ministry, and that comes first in sacred music. Ministry, artistry, and industry. Those 3 things working together, that's a good recipe. Now let me explain a little bit of what those mean. Ministry is the message. It's the word becomes song. We get to treasure that and hold it close. What a great privilege that is for us as musicians, as writers, composers, lyricists, arrangers, to be able to carry this beautiful gift of the gospel and scriptures and classic hymnody and all these things, these great truths, things that mean a lot here, and we get to set them free in the gift of music, decorate them and lift them up on the wings of song. Wow, that is a privilege, and I never take it for granted. Every day I'm grateful for that. So the ministry part of the formula is all about message and making sure that is front and center, because there's a world is full of a lot of music doesn't say anything beautifully, doesn't say anything beautifully. And in sacred music, we must say something that is eternal and worthy. The words are so very, very important. Now, not styles notwithstanding, because there are so many languages of worship. I mean, you've heard everything from in these reading sessions to from calypsos to contemporary praise songs to Gregorian chant and art, lots of complicated art songs and all of it, wonderful and magnificent. So we won't linger long with any arguments about which style is appropriate. But here is another little Joe bumper sticker. The words will always lead you to the truth of the song. So if you're struggling with, I want to make this song, it needs to go this way or that way, really find the heart of the text and see where that takes you. It'll intersect at some point with your own musical journey, your own faith journey, and that eternal message where it intersects, there's going to be energy there, and that is where that music will begin to reveal itself to you in a natural and organic way. That may be in any of these styles, Sometimes it's the way the word is pronounced. Lloyd Larson a few minutes ago was giving me a hard time about one of my pseudonyms. I write under 10 different names. And he was being very subtle and coy about it, sending me a message about it. But this song was called "Let the Redeemed of the Lord Say So." And of course, you know where I got that. I got that from Scripture. And I wondered how I was going to set it. And there's so many people have said it. I'm not the great composers, much less, what will I add to anything? Well, I spent some time saying the words over and over. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so. The way of the Lord, the way it trips off the tongue. Let the redeemed of the Lord. Let the redeemed of the Lord. And that's the way it started, just with finding the joy of saying the words. And scansion, which is a lyrical, emphasis of the words, the syllabic emphasis. There's a certain importance to that for clarity's sake, but there's also this joy from where the music leaps. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so. The redeemed of the Lord say so. Before I had me a little. I decided to put it in minor. I tried it in major. It just seemed that, it's okay. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so. It's a nice rhythm. It can go in either way, but I found a perfect little match for me. You may have hated it. That's fine. But for me, in my discovery, I went, let the redeemed of the Lord say so, the redeemed of the Lord say so. It's just a little minor melody that rose and fell. And as it did, it just seemed finally natural. I want you to know that I wrote 20 variations on that before I arrived at the one that felt most natural to me. Is one of those others better or worse or whatever? I don't know. It's so, I'm not sure there's a right or wrong in it. It's just that one, after a season of dealing with it, seemed to be most natural and tripped off the tongue and followed the text in the most natural way. So here's what all of this means is let the words lead you to your experimentation. Don't not consider, when you're dealing with vocal music, try to make the words a vital part of what you're doing. You will read lots of other ways of approaching it, and I can only share mine. I know that I think it's Elton John or Billy Joel or whatever starts with the tune. It starts with the tune. Sometimes I have to start with the tune, especially if I'm using a folk song, and write the words backwards or the arrangement. So it's necessary then. But when possible, I think you'll find it very rewarding to start with the words and let the music grow out of them based on their sonic characteristics, their theological gesture, because as some of the words will lift you, there's a great J. Althouse piece with Hope Publishing. I raise my hands to you, I believe the name of it is, and the music starts, and then as the lyric begins to rise, literally rise, the melody slowly arches up. And I use that sometimes as an example of just the organic nature of the way the words and the music shake hands and sort of learn to dance together. Very important part of the way that we approach our craft. So the words, very important. That's the ministry and message part of the formula. The middle word is artistry. And artistry is sort of, I love listening to people try to describe higher music to lower music and pop music and all this, and folk music, and spirituals, and all the different forms, some of them very simple and some of them very complex. And they try to describe what artistry is, but of course it's a moving target. It changes based on people's experiences and their opinions about what is good music and what is, not good music. I don't spend too much time with those kinds of things. I believe that artistry is something very mysterious, but yet it is also craftsmanship. Craftsmanship that meets that mysterious thing that we don't control as composers, that mysterious relationship we have with our performers, with the printed page. There's this great scene in Amadeus. You know the movie Amadeus? Anybody familiar with that? Well, Amadeus, there's a point where Mozart's sick and he's trying to write the Requiem, and Salieri is at the foot of the bed, and he's trying to notate the Requiem. Can you imagine being in that position? Here is one of the greatest composers, if not the greatest genius of all time, and he is at the end of his life and he's writing a Requiem, and you have to write it down as he's hearing it inside of his head. And Mozart is leaning forward and he's going, and the flutes do this, and he would sing the part and slow down, you're going too fast, Do you remember that scene? It's a crazy good scene. Okay, so you can experience that scene on a lot of different levels. But to me as a composer, all right, we have that same relationship with the page. Here we are, we're Mozart, and we're writing this thing that we feel and we hear, and we think we see it, and then it's not there, and then we get it again, and it's just moving around. It's so hard. And then there is this distance. In the movie, it was the distance from the headboard of the bed where Mozart was had his head back, and at the end of the bed, it was that 6 foot, right? And the limitations of language, what he was hearing in his head, and he was trying to communicate it to Salieri. And then there was the limitations of the pen and the speed which Salieri could understand. That is our dilemma, is it not? The dilemma of composition right there in that movie, trying to get what we feel, what we hear in our souls, in the deepest places in our hearts, and get that onto that page so that somebody 200 years from now, or 2 weeks, or Wednesday night choir rehearsal, can actually look at that page and know what we felt. And then there's the mystery of writing it in such a craftsmanship way that when they perform it, it goes into the heart of the listener. Look at how many things we are dependent upon in this mysterious conversation that we're having. Our inspiration meets the ultimate destination with our listeners through a very interesting journey. And the more you know about that journey, the better off you'll be, because you'll be considerate of it at every step. A lot of artists, a lot of composers kind of retreat back onto their pedestals of this is what I feel and that's it. They don't consider pedagogy. They don't consider the group they're writing for. They have lost themselves in their own sort of imagined world. Every once in a while I do too. We all do, don't we? But to be honest with you, to be successful, I had a composition teacher once tell me, Joe, what you put on the page is not your composition, because music doesn't exist unless it's being performed. It's dots and dashes on a page, and it has a certain visual appeal. Maybe you can imagine what it would sound like, but truthfully, to be fully realized, it must be performed. So artistry and craftsmanship are essential in creating that sacred link between the message and our inspiration and the process of delivering that inspiration to the people who will ultimately receive it and be moved by it and be encouraged by it. And also, it's self-joyful. I mean, it's just the way that you feel most fulfilled in the time you spend when you can see that ultimate presentation of praise in a worship service or in a concert hall. There's not much better than that. So artistry is, of course, building the excellence, all right? Excellence, always excellence in all things for the glory of God. May the works of my hands bring you pleasure today, my Lord. The prayer of a great architect. Artistry, it doesn't, I know there's a way of saying art for art's sake, but it's never been for me. It's art for sharing, art as praise, art as worship. That's its highest calling. It can also have its own culture and all of those things. We all understand that. But I think the heart of it all is much deeper than that. So we have ministry, message, and we have artistry and craftsmanship in that middle part of the formula. The last part of the formula is industry. And industry is, of course, I'm being clever. See how I did that? That's artistry, ministry, industry. They all sound the same. So the industry part of it is understanding your sacred marketplace, right? The more that you can learn about what's happening in the sacred zeitgeist, the more, if you are inclined to be a servant composer, you will know who your audience is. Who are the people? What is the occasion that you need to write for? Learn the seasons of publishing, or at least the seasons of the church year. Dialogue with your pastor. Dialogue with who you are writing for. Are you writing for a children's chorus because you need a children's piece that fits into the blessing of the animals, and you're going to have your children sing? But you can find anything, right? So you're going to write the piece. Well, immediately, though, this is not, I'm an artist and I must write what's on my part. Nope, got to write this piece right now. And that directs you, and it just drives you in such a dramatic way. You can expand the idea of why I'm writing, or who I'm writing for, rather, to market powers as well. Just what are churches looking for? What are they needful for? Well, I saved the industry to the last of it because now we go into a place where we find ourselves at an interesting crossroads in sacred music history. We've just come through what they call worship wars, right? And so there's been a change in the way that music is presented in worship, and contemporary worship versus traditional, and all those arguments is really, part of the stuff that is swirling about us as writers. But then comes along this crazy virus, and suddenly, who would have believed, singing is just the side of illegal. This beautiful gift, this lavish gift, is suddenly denied us. Everything is turned upon its head. So now we are being delivered from this, it would appear, though we keep having bumps, and it's not over yet, but we see the light at the end of the tunnel. Now we have to look back and see the wreckage. I'm reminded of planes flying over World War II bomb sites in the various arenas of the warfare, and seeing these cities just leveled. Well, we've been leveled. Publishing companies went out of business. Publishing companies that were here for over 100 years, went bankrupt. There are consolidations and sales and catalogs going permanently out of print. Who would have thought in less than a year and a half, 2 years, that all of that damage, that atom bomb called coronavirus, could have inflicted that kind of, it hurt the highest levels. The house I'm in right now, I'm struggling to keep. And I've had to pivot the best I can, and well, not to get into it, but it's been touch and go. I'm not going to lie to you. The marketplace has shrunk because of that. And of course, so are the publishing paradigms that we used to hang our hat on. So as never before, we have to focus on being useful as we rebuild the infrastructure of our worship industry. Those are two words I don't feel real comfortable using in the same sentence, but I think you know what I mean. This whole thing, churches have been hurt too. I mean, you can see the attendances are down, choirs are limping back into the loft. We have wounded Alleluias. But the good news is there's a great crescendo coming. The wounded Alleluias will heal. And this is all going to be something that we can look back on and say, I was part of the building. Now, that means being selfless in the way we write as sacred composers. And I'm challenging you, and I can't see your faces. I'm just speaking to a screen here. But I know that you want to be useful in the rebuilding process. This is an opportunity. It's, yes, do I have to change? Does Joe have to change? Yep, I sure do. I'm going to have to write differently. I won the championship last year with my team of seniors. We went to the state championship and won the baseball championship for the whole state. Next year, I have freshmen. You see what I'm saying? We are in a period of time where we have to humble ourselves to begin to rebuild. We're going to be teachers through song. I have another little phrase. I'm nothing but a bunch of walking bumper stickers, folks. I think we're going into a season where we're called to excellence, but it's an excellence without arrogance. We have been broken and humbled, so our writing needs to be excellent, but it doesn't need to be arrogant. Can we do that? Can we write music that is accessible and achievable and approachable for our people so they can use that to help build and encourage their choirs in the aftermath of all this? So here are some thoughts for you. As you write in the days ahead, and this is not forever, you can still write your symphony number 9, just don't do it first. All right? You can write your 9th symphony, but you're not going to write it first. I'm giving you another bumper sticker formula for you. All right? As you consider your works moving forward in this transition time we have, consider this formula. Shorter, simpler, smarter. Let me say it again. Shorter, simpler, smarter. What do I mean by this? Well, first of all, shorter. And this came to me because I was hearing reports that churches were going to rehearse, but they were going to limit the time that they had to rehearse because of restrictions and safeguards and all of these kinds of things. Also, church services were going to be compact. So you may notice in the next several releases for our publishing company, and I think others, that there will be a real concentration of the actual time that the songs take place. And you go, oh, but it takes time for me to get my, and I understand that. I understand it, but don't be surprised if that doesn't land as well, or you don't get as many performances. Twice a year, I typically take choirs to Carnegie Hall, and they have a night with Martin music, which is really a thrill, of course. But they all got canceled. I had those all canceled. And we've already been in conversations about 2022 and the types of music that we're going to be presenting. And even at that level where I can usually just pull anything out of, I can write and spill ink on the page pretty fluidly because you have 350 singers and a full orchestra. But even at that level, there is a conversation about trying to help choirs be able to prepare for the concert and not giving them stuff that will, you can't be in the same room for 8 hours, those kinds of things. But also that their own groups where they learn the music might be challenged to put on some massive work. So even at that level, they're trying to be sensitive. So shortening things, simplifying, and I don't mean dumbing down when I say simplifying. Part of this has to go back to the craftsmanship thing. Crafting, some people think that harder means artistic. Have you heard that? I mean, when you go to college, they say if it's not harder, I've got enough degrees to start a thermometer company, but I've never thought that. I have never thought that artistry and difficulty were somehow another the thing. I played the Prokofiev third piano concerto. I know what difficult is. But that's not what made it artful. And so I believe that you can achieve both a balance in pedagogical integrity and artistic integrity. I think those two things can dance. And I think right now, well, many of you might be piano teachers. You might be school teachers. Wouldn't it be wrong to go before your junior high school choir and plop down the Messiah in front of them? Well, of course, the ranges are all inappropriate. They can't, it's not pedagogically progressive in the right ways. Well, church choirs are going to be in that situation. They always have been. They're works in progress. Each year is different. Each church is different. I was on the road 300 days a year before my, this thing hit, 300 days, 50 weeks a year in front of choirs doing guest composer things. Some weeks I go into a church that has 80 in the choir, and they've got a guy up front who's been there 30 years. That choir is tight. It's wonderful, and they've got their vowel sounds. I don't even have to work those kinds of things because they've already had that kind of, stuff drummed into them. It's already, the choir is there like a fine-tuned instrument. And then the next week I'll go to a little church out in the country, and they're just beginning. And I love that. And you need to love it too. Don't write for just one group. Write for anybody who has a need. And sometimes I cry just as big of tears, maybe even bigger, for those small churches when they achieve, as I do for that big crescendo and standing ovation at Carnegie Hall. I really believe that. I'm not just saying that. I think there is, I think we just sometimes miss the boat on what our calling actually is through our dots and dashes. And I've worked on it in my own heart, and it's brought me great joy to be able to meet multiple needs at any given time, or at least I try to. And I hope you will also realize where that greatest need is. So we've had all this cultural influence on worship worship settings. We've also going to be looking at production budgets and their impact. That's a big deal. That's the industry interacting with artistry, and it's sort of the message in a way. It's going to impact our decisions in publishing, and ultimately, I think it's probably right to consider it. This last cycle, we did no major orchestrations, and some people are frustrated about that, I guess, because their orchestras are back in playing. But because the groups are smaller and the volumes of a smaller group over a 40 to 60 piece orchestra, that's a consideration that has to be taken. I have decided in my spring work for this next year, which I'm writing right now, to create more of a chamber orchestration or a consort. So the cantata is not 45 minutes long, it's shortened to about 30. The ranges I've lowered a little bit. I've even used some pre-existent things I've used in the past to help the company meet their budget restraints. Things that may not have to be re-recorded, but just retooled. It's a Song of the Shadows kind of thing. It's a Tenebrae service. And I'm creating a chamber service. And I'm not looking at it as, oh, I'm so limited. Woo, woo, woo. No, I look at it as an opportunity. It's an opportunity for once to write something smaller and more for right now. I don't know if it'll have a shelf life or not. None of us ever do. History overrules us all. If you'd have told me 25 years ago that a TTBB piece that was 7 minutes long and was hard and 3 sections through composed, really sad, called The Awakening, would have sold 1 million copies, I would have told you you're crazy, because 12 publishers turned it down. Why? Because it didn't have any chance. And yet history overruled that, and it's become my signature piece. I'm not bragging or complaining. Please don't take it that way. But I'm just saying you need to let go of that. Let go of your piece when it's finished, because history is going to overrule you anyway. That's just wasted time. Go to the next piece. Move on, move on. So in this unusual time that we are in at this moment, let's remember to keep it shorter and craft it in such a way that it has pedagogical integrity. We're going to call that simpler, because I like things with alliteration sort of that rhyme. And because you can remember them easier, I think. Or maybe I just like playing around with words. But shorter and simpler. Now, what do I mean by smarter? Well, in some ways, it's a little bit like simpler. Smarter means crafting it in such a way that you can see if you can get the same effect with lesser difficulty. It's like getting more gas per mile out of your fuel. Not a bad thing. Can I pull the heartstrings? Can I reach these moments of focus and climactic crescendos using less than what I am used to doing? I got a commission, around the turn of the 2000, millennial turn, from a group in Dallas, and Dallas Symphony, and it was to set a book to music called The Song of Wisdom. I called it Song of Wisdom. The book was called Old Turtle, and it was a great project, but I was told you do not need to hold back. It's a professional group, 40 minutes. We want 45 minutes, and man, I could throw everything onto that page. And it's nice to get those kinds of commissions for sure. But in this moment right now, I think the more likely thing you'll get are smaller and smarter pieces, because remember what the guy said, that what is your composition is what is performed. So if you go and you hear your very clever little tonal shift or 8-part fugue, and it's butchered, that's your piece. And you can scream into the night if you want to, But our job is to be partnering with our performers and helping them achieve their artistic goals and their message goals through the excellence of our craft. So smarter means that kind of curating. Uh, I want to talk to you a little bit about what's happened in the publishing industry, so that maybe that will help you direct your writing in the days ahead, and maybe you can type in some questions for me if that's something at all that you're interested in. I've got someone here to look at your questions and pass them along to me. So if you want to enter those in, that will not be a distraction, I assure you. Because of COVID's impact on the finances of the publishing industry, and more bankruptcies are coming, more closed doors are coming from major publishers in the days ahead. I'm sad to tell you, it's just they've been irrevocably damaged in some arenas, and it will take a time. So the publishing industry will start to rebuild in a more micro way. And also, it opens up an opportunity for you that I want you to know is valid. Even though I work for the world's largest publishing company, Hal Leonard, of music, and just one of the outstanding distributors of music, there are things markets that they don't reach, and you know this. That there's just things that don't make sense for a large box publisher to involve themselves in. Those are niche marketplaces, boutique items that perhaps you are specially equipped to speak to. And new conduits have opened up, new platforms, new opportunities for what we call self-publishing. Now, 30 years ago, if you self-published, unless you were, somebody like a Fred Bach who started your own company and made it expand and go big and all of those kinds of things, self-publishing was sort of, it was looked down upon. I never looked down on it, because publishing is just simply writing your things down and getting a performance. That's what I call it. And most of mine, I was published before I was published, because I would do it with my church choir and I would do it with my college choir. That's publishing. But now that's changed. It's a new time. There are opportunities for niche products, things that you couldn't sell to a big box publisher because it's just outside their market, their focus. And you can go self-publishing. Like, for instance, people like Cheap Music Plus, or our sponsor here for Alleluia, J.W. Pepper, has a very successful self-publishing platform. You should investigate those things and consider them, especially in this time where everybody is shrinking their crop sizes, where publishers are kind of, I don't know, they're circling the wagons and going with their core product. And it's probably going to be a season of, haven't we done this one before? They're not going to take a lot of chances. That's the best way to say it, because they can't. There was a time where things were just so good that we would go, hey, let's do this experimental thing. Let's stretch our bubble a little bit and take a chance on this piece of music that's outside of what our usual marketplace is. I don't think that's going to be for the next 2, 3, maybe 5 years in this season of renewal and repair work to what we've known as the publishing industry. Same thing is true of non-sacred materials as well. It's just I think a lot of businesses are in that same boat. Restaurant, for instance, I'll give you the parallels. This is the industry part of it. I know sometimes we don't like to think about music having, common denominators with other areas, but it helps me focus and prepare and not be surprised or disappointed, but just to be informed. Have you been to your favorite restaurant since the masks have been allowed to maybe not be so present in our lives? Did you take a look at the menu? So many, I forgot what the percentage was. I saw it on NBC the other night. Menus have shrunk. They're not taking chances. They're going, if something doesn't sell to this level, they're getting rid of the beef tongue sandwich. You know, yeah, there were some people who, well, that was my favorite thing on the menu, but they weren't making their margins on that product. And so, because of supply chain problems, the rising cost of things, uh, there's been a consolidation. You have to write with that understanding. There's just not that many slots left. Paper. Have you tried to repair something at your house and buy some plywood? And what is paper made out of? Oh yeah, I remember. Guess what's coming? That's right. It's going to be a price hike in music. It's the only thing that can happen because paper has been that incredible inflation has taken place. All right, I have a good question here. I'm just going to take a little break here. In the new market, do you think tried and true composers will bump out the newcomers? Well, I hope so. I don't want any whippersnappers coming and stealing my retirement. Well, I will tell you this. I just about answered your question with a restaurant metaphor. The beef tongue sandwich is not going to sell. They're not going to experiment as many times. That being said, I'm very proud of the company I work for because even in the pandemic, we published some people for the first time in their lives. First-time publishers during this time. So open catalogs, I'm going to fight for that because I was an unsolicited manuscript. My first publication was an unsolicited manuscript. And I will pound the ground saying it's important for us to keep that open door. So I'm committed to getting your rejection letter to you quicker than ever before. Just kidding. But it's funny, don't you think? It's a good question, and I do think that there will be a season where they make the safe choice. And we're all, I mean, there are some super uber stars in the music business that are proven composers. It's like you put Harrison Ford in a movie, you're going to get your money back, right? You pay more for it, but you're going to get your money back because people love Harrison Ford, by and large. Well, publishers have invested monetarily in the marketing of certain composers that have become faithful brands. That's the word. Some composers are kind of their own brand. And as long as their work stays consistent and high and meets the need, they're going to be less of a gamble than a new composer. That being said, it's not all a closed door. There are publishers who do look at manuscripts. And let me tell you a secret about it. It's all about the song. You write a great song, you could put Melvin Luckadoo as the composer. And if it's a masterpiece, if it's perfect to the, if it checks all the boxes, then in 3 years they'll be talking about, now here's Luckadoo's latest piece. Melvin has just reached deep with this one, because you would be getting the energy from that piece and you can break through. Now, I do think rightfully that sometimes the name does get you noticed. I figured out early on in my career that by going out on the road a lot and standing in front of a lot of choirs and learning about what they need and developing relationships. I've got friends everywhere. I can get a free meal just about any place in the country because I've been traveling for 35 years. That helped me build my brand just by being out at churches and enjoying worship with lots and lots and lots of folks in different places. That was my strategy. I didn't do it for that reason. I did it because I grew up loving church when I was a kid. I've never stopped loving it. I love worship. I love singing. I love playing and love church people. So it's not a chore for me. So it was a logical choice for me to choose that way to build my brand. Other people aren't people persons. So you may have to do it in a different way. Paul Williams, the great lyricist that I worked with for many years, maintained and curated a very, very successful mailing list. And he would sit and send his new publications to his 5,000 people or however many were on there. And it made an impact. You know, he budgeted that in, made that part of his work day. And he was a full-time lyricist. So I do think it's going to be a little less easy for you, and it was always difficult. If it was easy, everybody would do it, right? Well, it's going to be a long haul until it gets back to, hey, we need to get some new composers in here. They're probably not going to be out soliciting it, but that doesn't mean that you can't get in there. And again, I just want to remind you that there were new composers in these crops that had never been published before. I don't know if you were in the reading session earlier, but that chorister's prayer that ended the one reading session, I think it was this morning, Dishman was the composer's name. That was his first published piece. And it came in the door and everybody fell in love with it. And I remember when the committee read it. I don't do the selection process. I have a committee that does it, that keeps the system, fair and balanced. They just thought, this is a very fresh approach. It doesn't sound like Joe. It doesn't sound like Heather. It doesn't sound like Lloyd or, whoever the composer du jour is. It was a fresh voice, but yet it was in our box, in the circles. And they sent it to me with a big check mark on it. I said, yeah, I agree with you. So it was a joy to record. And now we're looking for the Opus 1, number 2 from this young man. So yes, there is still a chance. But let me return, kind of circle the wagon back around to self-publication. I have a good friend, because this is going to live on the internet or on the site later on. I'll keep. I haven't asked his permission to talk about it. So, but he's a very successful composer. He's one of the finest arrangers I've ever worked with. We've collaborated many times with published pieces with big box publishers. But he is like me. He's very prolific, and I chose the route of developing 10 different pseudonyms so I could continue to write a lot in different styles, because I just love it. I just love it. I just write every day. And he's the same way, but he chose a different way. He chose to start writing in niche boutique marketplaces. Offertories for clarinet, piano. Offertories for 2 flutes and piano. String quartets for funerals. Those kinds of products that would never sell enough to draw the attention of a major house. Well, guess what? Self-published, and they are selling very, very well. And because his formula for success financially is different. Obviously, if you own your own stuff, he has learned how to work that and to create a whole sort of catalog of self-published works that not only, and he sells them digitally, which is a brand new thing I wanted to talk about because I'm running out of time. You guys got to come to my composer symposium sometime. The next one is in January. Go to Facebook and ask to join Composer Symposium, or send me an email. I'll give you my email here in a second. Joan, type in my email in the chat so they'll have it, and type in the Composer Symposium stuff if you have anything. Because it's just like 3 days, 4 days of solid, just all of this. And we bring in multiple clinicians who talk about their experiences, and it's a great thing to get perspectives and different things. But the self-publishing thing has become a major deal for him. And the digital publication is an incredible trend. Now, I think our publications, and I'm not going to give you a percentage because it is proprietary and I'm a good employee, but let me say this, that digital publications and hard copy publications are going like this, all right? And with people holding more tablets, the price of paper going up, I suspect at some point they'll even out pretty close to being even. I don't think paper's going away, don't get me wrong, but I do like books and Kindles are coexistent and they sort of compete with each other. I think both of those products are going to be important. I think digital delivery of tracks and listening and voice dominant things, products requires to learn the piece and come. So you don't spend your time hammering out the parts for your choir. You send the digital materials that you've purchased legally, and all the rights are right in there. You don't have to worry about that. You send that out, they learn the parts, then they come into rehearsal and start working on musicianship. So these digital tools are not only going to help the choir director, they're also going to help the composer. This friend of mine who has this niche boutique publishing outreach sells a lot to foreign markets through digital. In other words, your store isn't just for the Northeast United States or the South and to this denomination. This is worldwide. And so he gets a great percentage of his sales from people in other countries who are buying digitally, downloading it, and enjoying it. And they repeat and return to the same writer who they have learned to count on. Now, all of that said, everything we talked about earlier, creating these publications, you're going to have to invest in the look. It needs to be uncluttered. It needs to be professionally engraved and edited. So, and a lot of people think they can engrave. They can't. I think you should invest in and making it look like who you're competing with, which would be us. When I say us, I mean the publishing industry, right? It's got to have a look. It's got to be excellent. It's got to meet the need. And you're going to maybe you would invest in learning how to create demos that, I mean, you know, this instrument plays this, or maybe even go into the studio. A good friend of mine created a violin book, boutique violin book, put it on the internet as a self-published thing, did the demo themselves, and guess what? Sold very well. 2 years later, a major publisher picked it up. It's a back door, but it's a valid back door, and you're making money while you're doing it. This is just a little insider tip of what you're going to be looking at. What else? Oh, I'm running out of time, Joan. I'm not saying enough stuff. Do you have any questions? No, I see somebody. That's a great Alice Parker. That's a great Alice Parker quote. I've not heard her say that, but that's yes, absolutely. That's great. I may have to take that down and use it in the future. Very, very good. Questions? There's my that's my personal email. If you want to be a part of the Composer Symposium in January, I can send you all the information. Just say, hey, would you put me on the mailing list? I'll make sure you get the info. And on Facebook, we have a Composer Symposium page. Our Composer Symposium has been going for 18 years, 19 years. And we have them twice a year, usually live in Austin, Texas, where I live, and one in the summer in Atlanta. And we just got through with a virtual one, and hopefully next year we'll be, well, I'm planning on January being here in Austin 3 days. It's a 3-day one. The summer one's 4 days. But we'll be here in Austin. And we'll also offer a virtual component so that you can watch it virtually if you can't make the trip or you can't afford a flight to Austin, Texas and 3 nights in a hotel. And I'm going to bring in some of your favorite writers, some from the more liturgical forms and more artsy levels of publication to contemporary and to everything in between.
To know about the process of getting a piece engraved.
Oh, yes, the process of getting a piece engraved, there are many. We work in the publishing industry in-house sometimes. We have in-house engravers, but we also farm out engravings to a bevy of really talented people. I can't tell you exactly. It depends on a lot of engravers charge by the measure. Some even have systems of charging by the dot and the component, the little things, in the measure. What would they call those things? I can't think of what you call them, but they charge us that way. But it all comes out to about the same. It's just the way they figure things. But if you want me to connect you with some of the people, and you can get some quotes and say, I'd like to see some of your work. I'd like to, talk to you about engraving my work and making it look. And I have the same thing too. If you want to create demos, I have studios that I use all the time. I'm in the studio one or 2 months a year, really, in typical. And those people do outside things. They just don't work for me. And I can connect the dots for you on that. Happy to do so. They need the work right now, so I'd be happy for you to do that. If you need professional demos, they're expensive, but that's if you're going to really get down to it, that's the way it is. Any other questions? Boy, I feel like I've just skipped a stone across the water today. Are we about out of time, Joan? Is that the way it works? Yeah, we are. So I regret we are not in person, and we can just linger over a lemonade or an iced tea and just talk composing, because nothing makes me happier. But we'll try to get back with you with any other additional questions you might have in the days ahead. I'm sorry we had to format it this way. Otherwise, I'd be overplaying the piano and show you examples, and we'd be talking about this little tiny segment of the composing process. But with this kind of sort of thing, the distance, this was probably the best format we have. Thank you very, very much for your time, your consideration, and I wish you the best as you go out there and change the world with song. I think this is, whether you ever find publication in the ways that we sometimes celebrate, being able to write down your thoughts and journal your walk of faith through music or through lyrics or poetry, it's a rewarding thing, and I think I'm better for having taken the journey. Thank you for your time. I'm available to you anytime you want to drop me a line. I'll try to get back with you as soon as I can. Blessings on you, much grace, and we'll catch you on the flip. Have a great rest of your afternoon.